Good evening, I'm Wendy Mesley, and this is The National. Just hours to go until that defining face-to-face between Trump and Trudeau.
The key is that Justin Trudeau can't be pulled under the weeds.
The do's and don'ts of dealing with an unpredictable president. North Korea test fires a ballistic missile.
When Kim Jong-un sent up that missile early...
Sasha Petrusik is in Seoul. Proposed changes for Canadian air travelers to the U.S. Why some people are concerned. Plus, the Sunday Talk.
Mr. Vladimir Putin.
The satire is certainly biting Trump, but is it leaving a mark? First impressions aren't easy, and tomorrow could set the tone for a long, important relationship. Justin Trudeau will meet Donald Trump and has to decide what side of Canada he chooses to bring in front of the U.S. president. But we know he won't be doing that alone. Katie Simpson is in Washington tonight. She's been looking into what we can expect. Katie?
Wendy, this visit is all about finding common ground with the new president. And a senior government source says Justin Trudeau has no plans to lecture Donald Trump about his controversial policies.
The Prime Minister's most trusted cabinet members spent a week laying the groundwork, making the face-to-face case about why cooperation on issues like security and the economy are so important for both countries. Now it's up to Justin Trudeau to repeat that message.
The Prime Minister's objective is to explain to the President precisely how comprehensive our relationship is and how mutually beneficial it can be.
CBC News has learned one of Trudeau's goals is to get the President to publicly acknowledge the mutual benefit that comes from economic cooperation between Canada and the U.S. A senior government source also says Ottawa is hopeful both leaders will get along, as Trudeau is good at connecting with people. And if the controversial travel ban comes up, Trudeau plans to be diplomatic.
Justin Trudeau can't be pulled under the weeds, becoming a political commentator and a political protester. He's got to run a government, not a protest. And I think thus far he's resisted the temptation. His ministers have resisted the temptation to get into the domestic politics of the United States.
Trudeau is also expected to take part in a roundtable discussion on women in the workforce. But everyone will also be watching for any developments on NAFTA.
I intend to immediately renegotiate the terms of that agreement to get a better deal by a lot.
While Mexico has been the target of Trump's protectionist rhetoric, this meeting could be an opportunity for Trudeau to learn more about the president's intentions. But some observers aren't expecting an in-depth conversation tomorrow. This former ambassador to Washington says first encounters are more about setting the right relationship tone, adding one way to do so would be to offer Trump an invite to Ottawa.
I see no harm whatsoever in extending an invitation to the president of the country with whom we do the most trade by far of any other country, a country that is our neighbor, our ally, and our friend over decades.
Trudeau has invited 5 cabinet ministers to join him on this trip, including the defense minister, public safety minister, and the transportation minister. They're expected to help push the message of continued cooperation to the new administration. Wendy.
More about that women's roundtable. What do you know?
Well, what we've learned so far is that Canadian officials put the idea of this roundtable with female business leaders to the White House, and that there was cooperation on both sides to make it happen. While Justin Trudeau does make a point of promoting feminism in his world travels, it is not something that Donald Trump is known for. Quite the opposite, actually. So perhaps the White House saw this as an opportunity to help repair the new president's image. Wendy.
That'll be interesting. Thanks so much, Katie. Katie Simpson in Washington tonight. It is a shot across the bow that many see as a challenge to the new U.S. president. Pyongyang has test-fired a missile. Not an unprecedented move by North Korea, but it is a first for the Trump administration. Observers say it launched from the western region of North Korea and flew 500 kilometers before splashing into the Sea of Japan. But the ripples from it, as Sasha Petrusik explains, are far-reaching.
For North Korea, every missile test carries a message, internal propaganda like this, or defiance like today's launch. In South Korea, The reaction was instant and indignant. A spokesman for the foreign ministry says North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is irrationally, maniacally obsessed with nuclear and ballistic weapons development. Out on the streets, protests. South Korea is in the middle of a political crisis. Its president is facing impeachment. Among the issues, the country is split between those who want closer cooperation with North Korea and those who fear it. We must protect the country, says Bae Young-run. I don't trust the North. Like many here, she's counting on the U.S. for protection, and Washington has promised to supply a sophisticated new anti-missile system. But today's message from the U.S. wasn't nearly as clear. After a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe slammed North Korea. He called the launch absolutely intolerable and suggested closer military cooperation with the U.S. As for Trump,
I just want everybody to understand and fully know that the United States of America stands behind Japan, its great ally, 100%.
he didn't say a word about North Korea or Washington's planned response to the launch, despite previously tweeting threats of tough action. Despite U.S. assurances, observers here aren't convinced that Trump has a plan to deal with North Korea, and they're worried this will just embolden Kim Jong-un to continue with his nuclear and ballistic weapons program, regardless of sanctions, enticements, or threats. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Seoul.
A senior White House official has since responded to North Korea's missile test.
We are going to reinforce and strengthen our vital alliances in the Pacific region as part of our strategy to deter and prevent the increasing hostility that we've seen in recent years from the North Korean regime.
The U.S., Japan, and South Korea have called for an urgent UN Security Council meeting tomorrow. Trump is still juggling his approach to national security. With his travel ban suspended, the ball is back in his court, and a response is expected to come up soon, even as the mood on immigration issues got more tense over the weekend. Lindsay Duncombe explains.
A rattled world continues to respond to a new uncertainty at America's borders. In Mexico City, searing anger over the proposed border wall. This activist calls Trump's policies a threat to the global community. The world waits for Donald Trump's next move in an attempt to reinstate the temporary travel ban, keeping people from 7 mostly Muslim countries and all refugees out of the U.S.
Well, we're considering all of our options right now, Chuck.
Legally, the White House could appeal, even take it to the Supreme Court, or write a new executive order. But clearly, the administration thinks border control is the president's job.
There's no such thing as judicial supremacy. What the judges did, both at the 9th and at the district level, was to take power for themselves that belonged squarely in the hands of the President of the United States.
This is the plaintiff.
Trump's judicial losses were mocked on late-night TV and celebrated by protesters.
And let us note, the constitutional system is still functioning, brothers and sisters, because our judiciary made very clear. They said to President Trump, no, you can't. No, you can't. Chant with me. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't.
But anger here has another target. Last week, federal agents arrested hundreds of undocumented immigrants. Officials say most of them were criminals, and the Obama administration had similar targeted operations. But immigrant communities are scared, so much so that when a rumor went around Kansas City, Missouri this morning that agents might raid churches, the mayor tweeted it wasn't true, adding, "No, we do not need to take up arms. Courts solve problems, not guns." President Trump tweeted about the immigration action today, too, saying that gang leaders and drug dealers were being removed. A campaign promise, he said, and he's keeping it. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Coming up, digging deeper on how Trudeau should navigate the Trump administration. Adrian Arsenault asks around in Washington, and Keith Bogue looks for clues from other leaders' visits. A snowstorm in southern Ontario has made traveling treacherous. Police say there have been more than 400 collisions in the Greater Toronto area. The city deployed all of its 200 salt trucks as it plowed out from under the snow. Bad weather has also caused flight cancellations and delays. And if this is a taste of winter, the 3 maritime provinces are getting the full course. Blizzard warnings are in effect for most of the region, and Nova Scotia is expecting nearly 70 centimeters of snow. Mosques across Montreal opened their doors to the public today as a way to promote understanding of Islam.
We have some work to do from our side. We have to reach out and we have to invite our brothers and sisters and just, eradicate whatever fear they have.
Organizers fielded questions about Muslim customs and beliefs. It's been 2 weeks since a gunman opened fire at a mosque in Quebec City, killing 6 worshippers. The NDP leadership race finally got its first candidate today.
I am here to announce that before you all, that I am running to become the next leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada.
British Columbia MP Peter Julian said he would tackle inequality and put an end to tuition fees for colleges and universities. Also today, Quebec MP Guy Caron said he's stepping aside as the NDP's finance critic to consider a run of his own. The party will vote for a leader in October. U.S. border guards who work on Canadian soil could soon get new powers, including the right to search and even detain Canadian citizens. The proposed changes are part of an agreement aimed at making travel between Canada and the U.S. easier. But experts worry at what cost? Evan Dyer reports.
Straight to your right.
Preclearance is one of the perks of being Canadian. By going through U.S. Customs and Immigration in Canada, Canadians avoid the long lines that await other countries' citizens at most U.S. ports of entry. The deals worked well for both countries, which is why both agreed to expand it.
Today, we also reaffirmed our determination to move ahead with an agreement to pre-clear travelers through immigration and customs.
Both houses of Congress passed the U.S. version of the bill in December. Canada introduced its version of the bill in the summer, but Parliament broke before it could pass. In the meantime, there have been some changes south of the border. Calgary lawyer Michael Green advised Parliament on the existing pre-clearance agreement. He says one of the main changes in the new law is the loss of the right to simply walk away.
The Canadian going to the U.S. through a pre-clearance area can say, I don't like the way it's going, and I've chosen not to visit your country. I'm going home. And they can just turn around and walk out. Under the new proposed bill, they wouldn't be able to walk out.
U.S. agents will be able to question the Canadian traveler about why he or she wants to leave.
If that person tries to leave, then they can be charged with failing to cooperate, which is under this bill is an offense that they can be arrested for.
Toronto lawyer Howard Greenberg also advised Parliament on the original pre-clearance agreement, which denied American officers the right to search Canadians on Canadian soil. Until now, they've had to ask a Canadian officer to perform the search for them.
There's some ambiguities in the legislation that seems to suggest that the search may be conducted without the Canadian Border Services officer present, or even if the Canadian Border Services officer doesn't believe there's merit in doing the search.
There are other changes too. Until now, for example, U.S. border guards working in Canada were unarmed. Under the new law, they'll have the right to carry their sidearms. And the U.S. has given the same rights to Canadian border guards working in the States. The difference is CBSA agents mostly don't work on U.S. soil because there'd be so many ports of departure to cover. So while the deal is reciprocal on paper, in practice, it's mostly a one-way arrangement. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
A crisis tonight at the tallest dam in the U.S. As many as 30,000 people have been sent scrambling as officials in Northern California issued an evacuation order for those downstream from the dam. It was badly damaged after days of heavy rain, and now there are fears the emergency spillway, activated for the first time ever, may fail. If that happens, there could be flash flooding in 2 nearby towns. Security was on high alert at Hamburg Airport in Germany after more than 50 people were overcome by hazardous fumes. Hundreds were ushered out of the airport and dozens of flights were canceled after several passengers complained of burning eyes and breathing difficulties. According to a statement from the airport, the source was most likely a pepper spray cartridge discarded by a passenger. And in Greece, there was a massive evacuation after the discovery of an unexploded bomb from the Second World War. The 250-kilogram bomb was found at a gas station undergoing excavation. 72,000 people were cleared out of a 2-kilometer radius around the site. It took a team of experts half an hour to deactivate the bomb before safely removing it. Violence erupted as protesters clashed with police in a Paris suburb. The unrest is over the alleged rape of a 22-year-old black man who was in police custody. 4 officers have been suspended and face criminal charges. In New Zealand, rescuers stopped about 200 whales from getting stranded in shallow water by forming a human barrier. Nearly 300 animals died earlier this week. It was one of the country's largest recorded mass whale strandings. It's not clear why they beached themselves. Is the satire aimed at Donald Trump cutting commentary or a coping mechanism for his critics? Our Sunday Talk is next. The U.S. president has declared war on the media, attacked the judiciary, flouted decades of policy. He's also given Saturday Night Live its best ratings in years. With it, each week, the late-night comedy show has made its cutting satire of the Trump administration sharper and sharper as real-life Washington gets stranger and stranger.
Your organization's terrible. Your organization's terrible. Let's go. Go ahead. Quiet. Quiet.
For a country where politics have been turned upside down.
Jim Acosta, CNN.
No, not CNN either. You're overrated. Fake news.
SNL is now appointment viewing for millions.
Number 1, my stand on the Ronald Reagan announcement. Yellow.
People ask me,
The show has been cutting politicians down for decades.
I can see Russia from my house.
It's hot in there, very hot.
A vote for John McCain is a vote for George W. Bush.
But part of Trump's success is his keen sense of publicity, and there's ample evidence political comedy gets under this president's skin.
I'm here to swallow gum, and I'm here to take nades.
Good afternoon.
The White House has been forced to acknowledge dents in its image.
Melissa McCarthy needs to slow down on the gum chewing.
I am now limiting myself to 1 slice a day.
But some of Trump's true actions are stranger than satire. Blaming judges for the next terror attack, helping his own daughter sell her clothing line.
It's beautiful, it's shimmery, it's elegant, and it's $39.99.
When it comes to denting Trump's actual agenda, some wonder where late-night antics fit with activism. For those rattled by Trump, does laughter help or just help laugh it off? I'm joined by our panelists. Stephen Marsh is a novelist and writer for Esquire. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief at Walrus Magazine. And Tasha Carradine is a radio talk show host in Toronto. So we can get to the jokes in a moment, but it seems everyone's obsessed with Trump's behavior. Some would argue that it's as outrageous as the jokes. I mean, people seem freaked out. Are you freaked out after the last week or the last month?
I would say I'm somewhat less freaked out to the extent that I see people pushing back, especially the judiciary. The United States does have a strong system of checks and balances, and for a while there it looked like it was just going to sort of become a complete autocracy, as in Russia. I mean, there actually were signs that the people around Trump wanted to push the U.S. political system in that direction. So it was nice to see that 2 levels of court in the United States showed some backbone, and you are starting to see pushback from within the bureaucracy. So that, at least, the optimistic sign that there are people with common sense who could block Trump's agenda, such as it is. So maybe a little less freaked out for that reason.
Where are you, Stephen?
I'm more freaked out. Every week I get more freaked out. I mean, I think what happened this week was that, you know, it's sort of the panic of the first 2 weeks did calm down, I agree, because there was checks and balances. But things that would have been totally unthinkable in American politics 3 months ago have been utterly normalized, right? I mean, someone actually selling the goods of the president's daughter on White House time, you know, that just would have led to impeachment immediately. You know, there is not going to be an investigation into the Russian leaks. Like that is probably not going to happen now. So this kind of stuff has just, you know, vanished from discussion, and it's terrifying.
Tasha?
I'm a bit more with John. I'm less freaked out by Trump himself because of the checks and balances that do exist and that are proving to be, I think, effective on some of his policies. I'm a little more freaked out, though, for people who might be inspired by him, and to the level even border guards who are now looking at people's Facebook pages when they want to cross into the United States from Canada, turning them back on the basis, they say not religion, but clearly it was in the case of one woman. These kinds of things, these sort of micro actions that people are taking at all levels, whether just ordinary citizens or government officials, to me, that is disturbing because I think people are emboldened by Trump himself to do this kind of stuff.
Well, we've seen some protests. We've seen the Democratic Party try and push back a little bit, but most of the attention really has been from the comedians in the last little while. So let's take a look.
All right. Let me ask the circuit court judges.
So-called.
Excuse me?
So-called judges.
These three are federal judges, okay? They're actually more real than I am.
The bad people, they're pouring in, and you see them, and it's ISIS and San Bernardino and Chicago. I mean, look at Chicago. It's hell.
I hear you want to bring in a character witness.
His family, he's an incredible person with impeccable credentials, Mr. Vladimir Putin.
This is Russian President Vladimir Putin.
What do you think when you see this? I mean, obviously those comedians, I'm guessing, are not Trump fans. Are they helping him
well,
or
it's an
hurting
incredible
him?
Contradiction because, like, on the one hand, this is as good as SNL's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Melissa McCarthy's unbelievable. The Trump impersonation is unbelievable. But obviously, it's worse than ineffective, right? I mean, the thing about Trump is that he literally has been there at every point in the development of modern comedy. He was the big target for Spy magazine. He was David Letterman's favorite target. You know, he's been SNL's target for years.
And you don't think it's working?
Well, he's president now. I mean, you know, if he could have been hurt in any way by comedy, he would not be president. But instead, this relentless attacking of him has actually, it's created the conditions of distortion, which have allowed him to flourish.
What do you think, Daphne?
I don't know if he flourishes because of it. I think he flourished already. I mean, he's hosted SNL himself, and I think that what you're seeing now is a way of people almost coping with what they don't like about his administration. There are many Americans who voted for him who probably aren't watching SNL, maybe don't think it's funny, but for those who didn't, it is a kind of catharsis in a way I think to deal with what they perceive, the sort of fears that you articulated, Stephen, about what is happening. And I wouldn't say normalize it, but at least process it in a way that makes them maybe a little less scared, be able to laugh about it and go to bed at night and not have bad dreams.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, is it sort of like a like on Facebook where you can feel that you're participating, but it doesn't actually accomplish?
Well, I think it's a bonding ritual for people who don't like Trump. And you can actually see this on your own social media pages, is that if you post a video of something mocking Trump, such as an SNL sketch, the people who dislike Trump will think it's hilarious, and the people who like Trump will say, oh, that's stupid, it's not funny. And it's just another instance of the siloing of the media, which we've seen in other contexts where people who are on one side of the spectrum are in one set of media and people on the other side of the spectrum are on the other side, and they don't really have much contact. So yes, it's productive if you think bonding among leftists is productive.
And I mean, personally, like, you know, you cannot humiliate someone who has no dignity. Right, and who gave up dignity 30 years ago.
That's Krusty the Clown's
right, yeah, that's the MO here, right? And I mean, for him, it's all just attention. And I mean, he really has maximized the politics of attention, where conflict is, you know, conflict leads to influence. And he has managed, he has captured that
go ahead.
perfectly.
I don't think, I think it gets to him, though, and that is the difference between him and previous presidents who've been satirized. He has no ability, no sense of self-deprecation. He cannot make fun of himself. When people make fun of him, he tweets in capital letters that this is basically not funny. That is, that also emboldens the people who satirize you. They know they're getting to you. It's like being in the schoolyard and the bully taunts you. You're supposed to not taunt back. He doesn't get that
That's
at all.
a very good point. I think one of the high points in George H.W. Bush's presidency was when he actually went on SNL and actually met with, was it David Spade, I think?
I think it was, yes.
David Harvey.
Oh,
Dana
yeah,
Carvey.
there you go. Yeah. And actually had a moment with him saying, I don't talk like that. But that actually made him look big because it's sort of, he owned the satire.
It made him human.
On the other hand, Nixon on Hee-Haw, complete disaster, right? But that's true. It could go both ways. But Trump has really got to the point where he's, he only wins if you take him as a joke. His whole politics is this is all a big joke.
Well, that's what I was wondering about, because it does lead to cynicism about the political system. So if it's all just a big joke, then doesn't that just lead to apathy?
I think people think it's funny because of the portrayals. I think that, Melissa McCarthy's send-up of Spicer, it's so well done and so delicious, people will laugh. But at the end of the day, I don't think they think it's funny what is happening. I think, like I said, it's a way of dealing with something people don't think is funny. And I think that the satire also, if Donald Trump is serious in his criticism of the media and of entertainment in that world and its criticism of him, where does that go? There's a lot of fear. Would there be any attempt to shut down the media? Would these actors pay any kind of professional price? I'm not saying this is like the McCarthy era, but different McCarthy, obviously. But that sense of Hollywood being a target of the administration, I think, is very real.
I actually think that the real action is taking place among people who are earnest and angry and are not taking this in the spirit of comedy. The last few days, there's been all kinds of activists who have shown up at Republican town halls all across the United States, and they are chanting and they are angry and they are holding Republicans to account. And they are actually rejecting the idea that this is a joke, this is satire. And we're talking about Saturday Night Live because that's a mass media phenomenon. But I think change and the pushback against Trump isn't going to take place in the mass media, because I think inventing a new funny meme is not the thing that's going to hurt Trump. It's people who go on the local retail political level to their local Republicans and demand accountability. And that's actually starting, in fact, to have some effect. But that's grassroots politics, and that's borrowed from the Tea Party. The Tea Party was the least funny institution in the United States. They didn't have a sense of humor at all, but they got things done because they were earnest and they were organized and they were active. And that's what the Democrats are doing now.
I so rarely get to say this, but you are absolutely right.
Thank you.
The thing about Trump is that you have to understand he's a creature of mass media. He loves this stuff. Stumbling from crisis to crisis, we traditionally take as a political failure. But that's a triumph.
But you're not suggesting that he likes being mocked.
I think he loves attention. I would not dare to look into his soul, but from everything that his campaign has been, everything that his presidency have been, it has just been one burst of attention on him after another constantly.
He is the boss hog of American politics. That's a Dukes of Hazzard reference.
Thank you very much.
And Boss Hogg, by the way, one of two characters who was in every single Dukes of Hazzard episode.
And
well, despite everyone disliked Boss Hogg, but he was always a huge center of attention. And I think the same is true of Trump. He likes the attention. He likes the all caps stuff. And we were just talking before how we'd love to be able to talk about some other issue, but we can't because he's dominating all the oxygen in the room.
Yeah, but he also has to have the last word. That's the thing. I think he likes attention when it's on his terms, and when he gets negative attention, he's only happy when he's able to push back, and that explains all the Twitter action.
Which is why he likes Twitter, yeah.
Exactly.
That's why he likes Twitter.
And Tina Fey, her impersonation of Sarah Palin, was seen as really hurting her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, except she's going to be the ambassador to Canada.
Yeah, well, that's
what a terrible thing to have happened to her career.
Because 50% of America doesn't titter at SNL. They don't find it funny. And guess what? They're the people who elected the president, and they're the people who are going to be applauding if and when, God forbid, Sarah Palin becomes our next ambassador.
And does that embolden that crowd?
I think every action.
Or are they watching and laughing too?
Well, no, I think it emboldens them. That crowd looks at what happens on SNL and they say that's why we voted for Donald Trump. That's exactly these actors. They're out to lunch. They don't get us. They're elites.
Meryl Streep, Melissa McCarthy.
Exactly. The more Meryl Streep talks,
Hollywood, whether it's funny or dramatic, they just hate Hollywood.
It. Yep.
Yeah.
We're out of time, but The story ain't over. Thanks a lot. It certainly won't be funny for Justin Trudeau if he doesn't leave a strong first impression on President Trump. Coming up, Keith Bogue analyzes the British and Japanese prime ministers' visits. And Adrian Arsenault asks for expert advice on tomorrow's big meeting. That's next on The National.
On a sheet of white ice, speed is like magic. If you go fast enough, you can turn silver into gold. Lace up, put your head down, and go. Short and long track speed skating all winter long on CBC Sports. X Company, The Final Mission, Wednesdays at 9 on CBC.
From London to Beijing, from Tokyo to Tehran, leaders the world over are wondering where they stand with the new White House. That includes Justin Trudeau. He arrives in Washington tomorrow for a face-to-face with Donald Trump. There are few countries with more at stake in a relationship with Trump than Canada. And as Adrian Arsenault explains, between thin skin and tough talk, Trudeau's got his work cut out for him.
The America First president is letting the world come to him, holding court, holding hands. Canada's Prime Minister best study these moments.
Please.
He is next for that maybe long, potentially awkward first handshake. 19 seconds, by the way. That was how long that lasted with the Japanese Prime Minister.
Strong hands.
Is Justin Trudeau really ready?
The government line is that everything should be fine as long as Prime Minister Trudeau keeps reminding President Trump of all that's at stake in keeping it friendly. The at least 35 states that count Canada as their largest export market, the 9 million American jobs that depend on Canada. It's a logical argument, it's worked in the past, but that might actually prove a problem because everything now feels so new.
My intention to renegotiate NAFTA.
Nothing is a given.
We lose with Canada. Big lead, tremendous trade deficits with Canada.
Sure, those were just campaign moments, but the heartburn lingers.
Donald Trump has demonstrated again and again that he's extremely sensitive. Managing that personality is part of managing the Canada-U.S. relationship now.
Roland Paris had the ear of the Prime Minister as an advisor during and after the election. He's moved on since, but his respect seems firm, especially for how Canada is preparing. A buddy system at all levels of government, from the top on down, launching an American charm offensive, spreading the gospel that Canada matters. Then there's the supposed war room, a unit within the PMO just to handle current U.S.-Canada relations.
Has there ever been a coordinator for U.S.-Canada relations in the PMO before?
I think the closest comparison would be the way that the Government of Canada got organized very quickly after 9/11 to deal with the challenges of keeping the border open.
But that was after a catastrophe.
Yes.
Two men who couldn't be more personally or politically different. Not exactly a catastrophe, but a situation.
So it will be a true test for Prime Minister Trudeau and his government, but they've done everything right so far.
Have they really?
And they don't have a clue.
They don't have a clue?
No, not a clue.
Law professor Frank Buckley hails from Canada, but is an American now. His books on the path for American prosperity caught the president's eye. He's been asked for advice, drafted early campaign speeches.
We've actually started to believe that solving our great problems is an impossible task.
Including Donald Trump Jr.'s speech at the Republican convention. So Buckley understands the Trump mindset, but not Trudeau's approach.
We're hearing noises about how the relationship is great, but the interesting thing about those stories is the dateline is always Ottawa. It's as if the government bet the farm on Hillary Clinton and then woke up on the morning of November 9th and realized that that was a bit of a mistake. But even then, they didn't really change course.
That for months, Trudeau has been portrayed internationally as the antidote to Trump is one thing, but it's Trudeau's own comments that get under Buckley's skin.
How is the Donald Trump presidency going to affect Canadian-American relations?
Everyone leans in close to listen to my answer right now. I'm never going to shy away from standing up for what I believe in, whether it's proclaiming loudly to the world that I am a feminist, whether it's understanding that immigration is a source of strength for us, and Muslim Canadians are an essential part of the success of our country today and into the future.
Canadians may think the Prime Minister has avoided criticizing Trump, that the tweets have been subtle and smart. Not Buckley.
It's a matter of sensitivity. It's a matter of going to the United Nations in September and boasting about how we're not Yanks and how we do things differently, and we're the nice kids on the block. I think it would be highly advisable for Justin Trudeau not to malign the president any more than he has already.
If at least one poll is accurate, Canadians seem to want Justin Trudeau to stand up and speak out. But careful with that is the caution from those connected to the White House and not just by The View.
See where the round Palladian window is on the second floor? That's the living room. We're a Trump firm.
That's it.
Yeah, I guess.
So you're sort of like a Trump whisperer.
Barry Bennett was with the Trump campaign until he was fired. Same story with Corey Lewandowski. Fired, but still faithful. Together they've built a lobby firm. Lewandowski in Ottawa this week courting Canadian clients. Bennett is holding the fort, and he's got advice for Trudeau.
You know where the landmines are, though. Right. So this is why I'm asking you this.
The landmines are, Mr. President, you're wrong. Okay, drawing those kind of lines in the sand. If you want to criticize us, then you can expect criticism back, right? That's just the way it works.
Would you have recommended to President Trump that they do a joint news conference?
No, I wouldn't have. With all due respect to the media, that they're looking at finding those areas of differences and picking off the scab and making them a bigger deal.
Better, he says, Trudeau expect a private chat on something Trump likes about Canada.
You guys have a very aggressive immigration policy for people who can actually create opportunity in Canada. We actually need to emulate that here in the United States.
I can tell you what Jeff Sessions like. I can tell you, I guess, what Jared Kushner likes. What they like is the idea that Canada screens for immigrants who will make Canadians better off. That thought is entirely absent in the policies of the U.S. government with respect to U.S. immigration.
Add that to the talking points they suggest. Sure, emphasize the trade too. Be strong, but not holier than thou, Canada. And plan out how you want to manage that handshake, because it is coming. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Washington.
The CBC's Heather Hiscox is also in Washington for the Trudeau visit. She'll introduce us to Canadians living there and hear what they hope comes from the meeting of the two leaders. Join Heather live tomorrow morning from 6 to 10 Eastern on CBC News Network. What can we learn from the other leaders who have already stopped by the White House to say hello? Keith Bogue joins us from Washington next.
Hard ice. Men and women, after years of training, practice, and perfecting their routines, will compete on the world stage to forge their place in history. Everyone falls. Winners get up and keep going. Victory is not given. It's earned. Figure skating on CBC Sports.
Though we don't know what Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe talked about over golf, playing a few rounds likely served as a powerful diplomatic tool. But can it work for all world leaders when it comes to Trump? Keith Bogue joins us with more now. So, Keith, Justin Trudeau, doesn't sound like there's a golf game planned. So what will you be watching for in his meeting?
Well, I think, first of all, Wendy, this is going to be watched around the world from capitals of nations that may not have paid attention to Canada-U.S. relations before, because Trump is such an unknown quantity when it comes to dealing in foreign relations. We've had only a few examples so far, and each one of them is kind of a learning moment for the rest of the world. We've had the bumpy relationship between an old friend of the United States and Australia just a couple of weeks ago when they had a phone call together, which Donald Trump later described as the worst phone call he'd had with any foreign leader so far. Then we saw, as you mentioned, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe here over the weekend playing golf, and you see somebody in Abe who really seems to understand how to deal with Donald Trump. He was the first leader to come and visit him right after the election. Months before the inauguration, he brought him this gift of a golden golf club. In the news conference that they had on Friday, he flattered Donald Trump's golf game, and Donald Trump, by his own admission, says, "We are more than just friends. I don't just shake his hand, I embrace him." So those are two different ways to do it, and I think what we're going to be looking for is what does Justin Trudeau do tomorrow, because Trudeau is someone who has come from a country, Canada, where there is a lot of pressure on him to be very assertive with Donald Trump, because, let's face it, a lot of Canadians wanted to see a different president in the White House. And he has to be aware of that when he meets with Donald Trump. But he also has to be calm, cool, and collected. He's dealing with the most important trading relationship that Canada has, so he can't just be all assertive for the sake of the crowd back home. He has to be sensible in recognizing that there needs to be a long-term relationship with the United States.
Quickly, I guess the different way of approaching it was the UK Prime Minister Theresa May.
That's right. Theresa May came here desperately needing a good relationship with Donald Trump because she wants a closer trading relationship. And I think, the British people would understand that. But she might have gone a step too far when she invited him for dinner with the Queen, and there were protests in the streets after she did that. Back in London, I mean.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what happens tomorrow. Thanks so much, Keith.
Thank you, Wendy.
Keith Bogue, still ahead tonight.
I am sure you agree that we should talk frankly to each other.
When presidents meet prime ministers, a look back. That's next on The National.
In the arena, on cold hard ice, men and women, after years of training, practice, and perfecting their routines, will compete on the world stage to forge their place in history. Everyone falls. Winners get up and keep going. Victory is not given. It's earned. Figure skating on CBC Sports.
We've been looking ahead to tomorrow's big meeting between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. Now we're taking a look back at some moments between past Canadian prime ministers and U.S. presidents.
I am sure you agree that we should talk frankly to each other. Frankness, in good spirit, is a measure of friendship.
The issues and irritants that inevitably affect all neighbors are small indeed in comparison with the issues that we face together.
Our friendship is deep and our understanding is great, but we have many problems, of course.
But a day which also saw what looked like the beginning of a fundamental friendship between Mr. Trudeau and President Nixon.
This is a new era of consultation and, we hope, cooperation. Some American officials seemed appalled as Canadian security allowed demonstrators within yards of the first meeting between Prime Minister Trudeau and the President.
Canadians expect much of Americans, but more important, Canadians have faith in the Americans.
The Prime Minister was here to tell President Reagan what he was telling Canadian voters for the past few months, that he wants to restore not just good relations, but what he calls super relations between Canada and the U.S.
From President Clinton, there was no limit to the praise and the admiration he expressed for Prime Minister Chrétien.
Under your wise leadership, Mr. Prime Minister, relations between the United States and Canada have never been closer or more constructive.
He's a good guy, and I enjoyed to be with him.
4 years, 3 weeks, and 2 days since first being elected U.S. president, and George Bush said hello to Canada.
I frankly felt like the reception we received on the way in from the airport was very warm and hospitable, and I want to thank the Canadian people who came out to wave with all 5 fingers for
The purpose of the trip was that Stephen Harper and Barack Obama have some time to get to know each other and discuss whether they shared an agenda and some objectives.
I came to Canada on my first trip as president to underscore the closeness and importance of the relationship between our two nations.
We see ourselves in each other. We're guided by the same values.
And like all great, enduring friendships, at our best, we bring out the best in one another.
That's our look back. And now, just in time for Valentine's Day, more than 100 couples tied the knot in Vancouver today for free.
3, 2, 1, let the weddings begin! Woo!
Couples lined up early to take part in the city's 3rd annual pop-up wedding ceremony. Marriage officiants were on hand to make it legal. The only request was for couples to bring a marriage license and a $20 donation for the food bank. And that's the National for this Sunday night. For some of you, local news is coming up right now. And for news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Wendy Mesley. Thanks for watching.